Give a language model a fully specified chapter. Every beat is there, the required facts are there. The scene order is there, the characters, the turn, the closing hook, all of it. And still the chapter comes back short. Not a little short. Often something like 60% of what a human would write from the same material. Then you enrich the outline, add more context, add more source material, and the model quietly returns to the same comfortable length. That is the density ceiling. It is frustrating because the output can look competent on a quick read. The problem is not that it obviously fails. The problem is that it lands with less event load than the chapter needs. Today I want to walk through what I got wrong, why the obvious fix made the prose worse, and the structural change that moved the result from about 64% of human density to about 81%. The surprising part was not that one output was short. That would be easy to dismiss as a bad run. The surprising part was how stable the length was. A thin outline produced a short chapter. A richer outline produced a chapter that was still short. 3 times the source material still collapsed into roughly the same output size. That is a different kind of bug. It means the model was not simply missing information. It was normalizing the job into a familiar unit. 1 chapter, 1 pass, 1 comfortable amount of prose. If you're building long-form fiction, that matters because density is not decoration. Density is how much event, pressure, and change a chapter can carry before the next daily update arrives. A daily web novel chapter is not just a container for pretty sentences, it is a delivery mechanism. It has to move relationships, information, danger, payoff, and anticipation at the same time. When the chapter comes back short, the reader may not say, "This is short." They say, "Nothing really happened." My first instinct was the obvious one: push harder on length. Set a target, say, make the chapter longer. But that produced the worst possible trade-off. The count went up and the prose got worse at the same time. The model did not deepen the scene. It inflated it. It added more atmosphere, more simile, more summary, more tidy philosophical wrap-ups at the end of beats. In genre fiction, that kind of language often reads like purple prose because it sounds elevated while doing very little story work. The danger is that this can fool a dashboard. The word count improves. The visible artifact is larger. But the reader experience gets thinner because the added words are not carrying consequence. You asked for more chapter, but what you actually got was more surface area. More sentences, less pressure. This distinction is important. A longer paragraph can be better if every extra line carries a decision, a reversal, a sensory fact that changes behavior, or a hidden cost becoming visible. But a longer paragraph can also be worse if it only adds mood around a beat that was already complete. The density problem was asking for the first kind of length. The length pressure fix bought the second. So the rule I took from the failed attempts was simple: never solve a density problem by putting a word count burden directly on the prose. The model is very good at satisfying the surface instruction. If the surface instruction is length, it can satisfy length with verbal foam. If the surface instruction is structure, it has to spend words on things that actually change the scene. If the system is going to get longer, it has to get longer by carrying more structure, not by stretching the same beat. The actual diagnosis was the final integration step. Most multi-pass writing setups do a lot of useful work before the end. They plan, they outline, they collect constraints. They may even revise small pieces. But then the whole pile gets handed to one final request: integrate everything into the final chapter. That request has a gravity well. It compresses whatever it receives into one chapter-sized output. This is why adding more pre-work did not solve it. The pre-work could become more detailed, but the last pass still had to decide what a finished chapter should feel like, and it kept deciding in the same range. In practice, the final pass behaves like a summarizer with style, even when you want it to behave like a dramatist. It selects, smooths, and normalizes. The model is not saying, "I have no room." It is answering the shape of the request it was given. One chapter becomes one chapter-shaped thing, and that shape has a default size. The ceiling is not capacity. It is request geometry. That changed how I thought about the problem. If the ceiling were mostly a context window issue, adding more context would eventually help. If it were mostly a model capacity issue, a stronger model would cleanly remove it. But the behavior did not look like that. The output kept returning to the same band because the request kept asking for the same unit. Write one chapter, one request, one integration pass, one normalized result. This is a subtle but useful distinction. You can keep improving the information inside the request and still preserve the same failing boundary around it. The boundary is what tells the model how much completion feels complete. If that boundary is too large and vague, the answer snaps back to a default. Once you see it that way, the fix stops being a cleverer instruction. The fix is to change the unit being requested. The structural fix was to stop treating a chapter as the smallest writing unit. Borrowing from dramatic theory, and McKee is the clean reference here. A chapter is better understood as a short sequence of movements. A setup movement, a core movement, and a closing movement that turns the situation or hooks the next chapter. A movement is not just a scene label. It is a unit of value change. Something is set up, pressured, reversed, paid off, or re-aimed. So instead of asking for the whole chapter at once, ask for each movement on its own. Each movement gets its own required content and its own weight. A heavy core movement can take the space it needs. A light connective movement stays quick. Then the pieces are stitched together with continuity, but without asking one final pass to recompress everything. The important part is that each movement reaches its own natural length. That is how the density moved. The same kind of fast language model writing run went from around 64% of human density to around 81%. The key is what did not change. I did not tell it to be more flowery. I did not tell it to pad. I did not put length pressure on the final prose. Each movement was written fresh against the same plain style expectation, and the length came from the sum of real units, not from stretching one unit past its natural size. That last clause matters. A longer chapter is not automatically a better chapter, but a chapter built from multiple properly scoped movements can carry more story without sounding inflated. This is why movement level generation matters. The ceiling is per request. Change the request boundary, and the sum changes. The reason I trust the result is that I almost mistrusted my own eyes. Earlier in the same work, I had built a detector for purple prose and II flavor. It declared a chapter clean, 0% literary tone. Then a reader I trust looked at the same chapter and said, "No, it is right there. They were correct." The detector was not lying. It was obeying a bad definition. I had told it not to count a whole category of the problem, so of course it missed that category. This is the uncomfortable part of building evaluators. A clean score can mean the text is clean, or it can mean the test is blind. That is a useful failure. When your evaluator and your eyes disagree, doubt the evaluator first. The rebuilt measurement used two axes, not a blacklist. The first axis is where the tone sits. A literary line of scenery may be fine. The same tone inside dialogue or inside a narrator editorializing a character hidden feeling is much more damaging. The second axis is what kind of tone it is. Is it essay structure like first, second, finally, with a tidy moral wrap-up? Is it ornamental purple prose? Or is it statistical flatness, where sentences and paragraphs are too uniform and low in burstiness? Only that last piece really belongs to code. The rest needs judgment. Keyword blacklists are brittle because models root around them and because legitimate prose will sometimes use the same surface words. The point is not to ban words. The point is to define the failure at the right level. There is a through line here that keeps repeating in machine-written fiction. The visible problem often looks like a prompt problem. The chapter is too short, so write longer. The tone is too literary, so ban a list of words. But the fix that actually held was structural. Density improved when the unit of generation changed. Tone measurement improved when the unit of judgment changed. Neither fix came from a magic sentence in a prompt. That is not an anti-prompt argument. Instructions still matter. Style specs still matter, but they sit inside an architecture. If the architecture asks for the wrong unit, the best wording in the world is fighting uphill. This is also why I try not to describe this as a secret trick. It is more boring and more useful than that. It is unit design. The better question is what unit the system is operating on, and whether that unit matches the thing we actually wanted to measure or produce. So the one-sentence version is this. If you are fighting length with an LL, make the unit you ask for smaller. Do not stretch the prose. Change the structure. Ask for a movement or a beat cluster or another unit that is small enough to have its own natural density. Then assemble upward. If the result gets longer because more real units are present, The length has a reason to exist. I would genuinely like to hear what has broken the ceiling for you without breaking the prose, especially in long-form fiction or serialized writing. And the honest follow-up is the measurement side. How to score AI flavor without a brittle keyword blacklist while still respecting the kind of story the text is trying to be.